If you've been in and around the world of infrastructure for a while, you'll know that Terraform works great locally. Your state just sits on your machine and everything's nice and simple. But the moment you move into CI, you're going to need some kind of remote state. And that's where things start to get interesting, especially after the MinIO drama late last year, where a lot of people started questioning what open source really means in the world of S3 compatible storage. So today I'm going to show you how to run your own S3 backend using Garage. This is a fully open source and self-hosted S3 backend storage solution. I'll also show you how to hook it up with Tailscale and make it accessible from anywhere. So that means whether your runners are running locally in a Forgejo instance or in GitHub Actions or GitLab, or it doesn't matter. Anywhere that these runners are running, they'll be able to talk to your Terraform state and everybody's happy. Now, there are quite a few moving pieces to today's video. First of all, you're going to need a self-hosted Forgejo instance, at least if you're going to copy exactly what I'm doing, which is a fully offline, fully self-hosted replacement for GitHub and GitHub Actions. So you need a self-hosted Forgejo. You'll also need to spin up somewhere for the Forgejo runners to live. This is what allows you to emulate GitHub Actions locally. You'll also then need somewhere to run the Garage instance, and Garage is the S3 compatible object storage clone, open source software clone that we're using to store the Terraform state as OpenTofu does its thing. Now, what's interesting about what I just said with Terraform and OpenTofu, Terraform doesn't work with remote state storage tools that are not Terraform or HashiCorp Cloud. I forget what they call it. At least this was my experience a couple of months ago when I was testing this all out. And so what I did was I literally dropped in the OpenTofu binary as a replacement for Terraform. OpenTofu is an open source fork of Terraform. I think there was some drama with a business source license switch a few months ago, maybe a year ago now. And OpenTofu is a drop-in replacement for Terraform. At least that was my experience. There was no syntax changes required, anything like that. So if you've been on the fence about trying out OpenTofu, well, this might be a good project for you. So as I say, lots of moving pieces to this puzzle, and I'm running all of this on top of Proxmox. You can see here I've just got 3 LXC containers running Forgejo, the runner, and Garage as well. The payoff for doing all of this stuff is that I can go into my Terraform vars file right here and modify a couple of values. I don't want a 3-node cluster anymore and a 3-worker node cluster anymore with Talos. I just want, in fact, why don't I nuke the entire cluster and do 0 and 0, and this is going to completely delete my, it's not a real cluster, don't worry, but this is going to run through CI now. If I go to the Actions tab up here, you can see that it's actually running in one of my self-hosted runners, the entire Terraform plan stage and then the apply stage, where it will go out and talk over the Proxmox API and either clone VMs or modify them, or do what Terraform does, like infrastructure stuff. This does take a couple of minutes, and I won't make you watch the whole thing, but essentially what we'll do is basically delete these 6 VMs right here, and then walk you through the process of how OpenTofu is hooked up, how all the runners are hooked up, and all that kind of stuff. Like I say, lots of moving parts today, so make liberal use of the chapters down below. So there we go, with no manual intervention from me, those machines are now gone. They are kaput, they are no more. And that was done simply through the process of CI and OpenTofu doing its thing. So let's dig a little bit into the repos themselves and try and figure out a little bit about what's going on. So we see here, I've got this folder called .forgejo/workflows, and this is where all of the magic happens. You can see that this runs on a self-hosted runner with the tag or label of Docker. And then it checks the repo out, it installs the OpenTofu binary so that it can actually talk and do its thing. And then it literally just does exactly what you would do if you were typing it on the command line, and then does a tofu apply, auto approve, and off it goes. It does its thing. So essentially what this means is that whatever the state of your main branch is, because that's what we've configured up here, that is the state that Proxmox will be representing. Proxmox is just a vehicle for this example. You can, of course, use Terraform to configure all sorts of stuff. I'm just using Proxmox today as an example. You've got to make darn sure that whatever makes it onto your main branch is the state of the world that you would like to see, because if it isn't, then stuff's going to get deleted. Okay, so that's the workflow. Very straightforward. In the Docker folder, though, this is where you've basically got to set 3 containers up. 6 technically, because each service has its own sidecar. So let me show you what that looks like. The Forgejo server, and remember, Forgejo is the GitHub app that we're looking at here, effectively. Under compose.yaml, you'll see this is a fairly standard pattern for the channel at this point. I've got the application itself down here, configured in 15 lines of code. And then I have a sidecar Tailscale service container where I can essentially put Forgejo directly onto my tailnet using this name here. And then you'll notice, look, I'm actually accessing Forgejo itself on a tailnet domain name. I haven't had to configure a reverse proxy or anything like that. All I had to do was supply this tsserve config at the top of my YAML file, and then Tailscale will go out and hit let's encrypt and generate a valid TLS certificate for your domains automatically. It's really nice. Okay, the Forgejo runner is a similar idea. You can see that although we're not putting this one directly on the tailnet with a, what do we call this, a fully qualified domain name with a TLS certificate, we're literally just putting the runner itself here. We are just putting that runner with a valid host name on the tailnet so that the Forgejo runner infrastructure can go out and talk to it over the tailnet. Now, the value of doing this is it means that you can put this runner anywhere. You can put Forgejo anywhere. You can put it in the cloud and then have the runners behind a residential firewall, for example. And this, in the age of AI, I tell you, my gaming GPU is way cheaper than some of those cloud GPUs. Okay, it's not as good, but it's free. Ostensibly, to me at least, it's free. So if you want to put your runners in a different location from where your main code repository lives, and do it in a secure way without opening any ports or anything like that, this is the way to do it. I don't know of a better way to do it, honestly. So then within Forgejo, we need to go to the runners option here. So let me go to site administration, actions, and then runners. And creating a new runner is as simple as this. You literally give it a registration token and put it into the env file in the repo right here. And you can see that my token, I just put it in here. That then gets passed through to the underlying runner container and it picks it up and everything's golden. I mean, it's really straightforward. Because those two can discover each other across the tailnet, you really don't have to think about any networking whatsoever. It's very straightforward. Okay, so that's the runner side of things. And then finally, of course, the star of the show is Garage. Garage has been a breath of fresh air, and it's really simple to deploy this. It also supports distributed storage, so if you want to have a cluster across multiple physical locations, you can use Garage to replicate between itself and do... We're not doing any of that today. We're just doing a dead simple single node instance right here, using the same pattern of the Tailscale sidecar container to join Garage to our tailnet, followed by the same TLS certificate running on the root of the Garage domain right here. Now, Garage itself doesn't actually expose a website. So if I show you the fully qualified domain name, you'll notice that we've got a full TLS certificate, right? We've got connection is secure, certificate is valid, it's backed by Let's Encrypt. But Garage is only expecting programmatic API level access. It's not expecting me to go to the website and click around in a UI. That's not what this does. So you need to generate you need a script to create the buckets and interact with this thing, which is, funnily enough, exactly what is in this Garage init file right here. So there are 2 or 3 other files in this repo directory that you need to pay attention to. One is the auth key, and in fact, all 3 applications, if you'll notice, have a .env file where you would put your Tailscale auth key. You would go to the Tailscale admin console, click on settings, keys, generate an auth key, and paste that in to the env file. The compose YAML we just looked at, and garage.toml, this is how you configure the actual Garage instance itself, just a standard application configuration file. You need to put that wherever your compose.yaml is telling Garage to look for it. So you can see right here on line 38, mine is telling garage.toml to look in the local directory, the PWD, the current working directory for that file. And then there's an init script right here, which basically sets up the S3 buckets that we need for Terraform to be able to talk to Garage. Now we need to figure out how this is all kind of plumbed together on the back end, because there are a few, unsurprisingly, a few moving parts. So in the example Proxmox here, you can see I've got a backend.hcl file. Now you could configure everything here and then commit this file to Git in plain text for everybody to see. Not a good idea. So what we have is under settings and then actions and then secrets, we have these variables here, these secrets here. And in here, you've got things like the garage endpoint, which is that fully qualified domain name that I showed you earlier of garage.velociraptor, whatever. Then you've got your access key and your secret key, and those are your S3 bucket keys. In the root of the repo, I've included a helpful neighborhood just file, and there are a bunch of things in here. Basically, this morphed from me doing it locally to moving my S3 state into Garage. So over time, I've gone from running things locally, like you can see here, to running things in Garage remotely. So there are a bunch of steps you can follow to init your remote Garage instance. None of this is production grade stuff. This is just stuff I've been hacking around with to really give you a taste, you know, of what's possible when you start putting everything on Tailscale. But why don't I show you? I'll do just Garage keys, and then I think it's S3 host. And there you go. So I can use these helper scripts to connect to the remote node and get my secrets out without having to know all of the exact syntax and stuff like that. Obviously, that's not production grade secure, but I'm sure you can figure out a way to make it more secure than what I have here. Now, what else do we have to show? We have the workflows. This is the other thing I was going to show you. These lines here, this is where Tofu is connecting to the Forgejo secrets backend and injecting these secrets at runtime from the repo level secrets. So you don't have to store anything publicly. And the same thing goes for the Proxmox API token, as well as the Garage endpoint, the access, and the secret key as well. And so essentially, after all of that is plumbed together and hooked up, the payoff is that I can now go into my TF vars and be like, hey bro, I want a 1 control plane node and a 1 worker node, and 2.5 minutes later, that's going to be reflected in my Proxmox instance. As I say, there's an awful lot of moving parts to this kind of stuff, but you're replacing very complicated cloud services and doing it completely self-hosted and completely offline and locally. Everything I've just shown you, literally everything, is running on this single framework desktop node in that tiny rack behind me. I mean, it's a tiny little computer. And you don't even need anything near that level. In fact, look, those machines are back already. That was really actually very fast. And so you can see that just by putting together a few basic building blocks, you can start to replace proprietary cloud services locally with fully offline, fully self-hosted, fully open source, completely privacy respecting. Are you getting the message yet? I like this stuff. With a fully privacy respecting solution like Forgejo, like Garage. And the best part is this will keep working until the end of time. It's offline, it's local, there's no business model to feed. It's literally just you and your infrastructure. Now, of course, this wouldn't be the Tailscale channel without a little pluggy plug. That said, you don't have to use Tailscale to connect all of this stuff together. I'm simply showing you that you can. And the reason for that is, like I say, with the runner example earlier, if you have some hardware constraints that you don't have access to a GPU or to some kind of physical device that you're building and running a test suite against. In fact, a few months ago, probably years at this point, I spoke to Gina, who builds the Octoprint project, and she uses Tailscale and GitHub Actions to do exactly that. She uses Tailscale to connect the GitHub Action Runner from the cloud to something running on her desk with no further configuration required. So the power of open source, people, it is real. Okay, well, I hope you found that video interesting. It's one of those ones, there was like tons of work went into figuring this all out on the back end. And I'm sat here recording this video, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's like probably 10 or 15 minutes. I feel like it should be like a 4-hour Ben-Hur epic, but it isn't. So anyway, I hope you have found some enjoyment. Don't forget, everything you need to get started is linked in the description down below. You can come and find me on Discord. I'm at AlexKTZ. I think it's discord.gg/Tailscale. Come and ask us questions about CI and stuff like that. We love to talk to you guys. So until next time, thank you so much for watching. I've been Alex from Tailscale.